Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report, Wednesday's edition. What a change from yesterday, broadcasting from chilly but sunny Irvine, California. No longer in the 30-mile-an-hour monsoon rainstorm we experienced yesterday, folks. Hey, happy to have you back on a Wednesday. Lot to go over today, and boy, the Democrats are having some mea culpas. I couldn't be happier to welcome a returning Schaftlein veteran, Heather Shouse. Shouse in the house. Welcome back to Schaftlein Report. Happy to have you today.
Thank you, Mark. As always, it is a pleasure to be here.
Hey, listen, the esteemed Democratic Party seems to be having a mea culpa about the crime wave going on in this country. Heather, it's been experiencing it every major city, not just major cities, all over the country. But now I'm shocked. I turn on the news today and I see the mayor of San Francisco basically saying we are going to not only refund the police, we're going to increase the police budget. Heather, we talked about this many, many times. Is it a mea culpa or what's going on here?
It's interesting that you asked that, Mark. I had a debate with actually a congressional candidate, Beatrice Cardenas. She's running in Los Angeles County and for Congress. And it was very interesting to hear a Republican say that she doesn't think that people who have children in their homes should own weapons or guns. And I think, as we look at defunding the police and things like that, California is kind of a twofold issue. You defunded the police and you removed people's ability to defend themselves with your unconstitutional gun laws. So that's why crime is going up, because you don't have guns in the homes of every family. You don't have any sort of deterrent there. And then you cut the resources to the police, so you don't have any way of enforcing the law. So they really shot themselves in the foot in multitude of directions. I'd like to see, if they're going to have a mea culpa on the police, I'd like to see them have a mea culpa on the Second Amendment and start letting people defend themselves.
That would be nice too. San Francisco is the second major city to do this. Minneapolis, which was the birthplace of this defund the police movement, earlier this month did the same thing. They restored the police budget almost to the levels where it was prior to the George Floyd incident. And again, it's just sort of crazy, Heather. We went through a complete cycle reversal where, the defund the police movement, which you got to admit was a debacle politically for the Democrats. I mean, even Clyburn was like, no, make this go away. This is not what we believe. But they did. And they listened to the far left wingers of their party, the BLMs and the Antifas. And again, you and I both know that's why they didn't get criticism prior to the election. They didn't want to criticize their base.
Right. Yeah, I think too, when you look at the refunding, crime started touching them, right? It started actually impacting them. So you had these council members who were like, yeah, let's get rid of the police. Let's not fund them. And then the crime started touching them. It showed up in their back door and they're like, whoa. That only happens for the peasants, not for the elites. So we need to rectify this. Right. And I think initially in that area, they funded private security for themselves first. Right. And then they were like, okay, maybe we need even more than that.
Right. That's exactly right. And it's about time that they came to that realization, because the sad truth of the matter is, and again, we don't try to pick on Chicago, but just yesterday, in one day, 7 people shot, 4 killed in separate instances. Report came out today, 12 deep blue cities have the highest murder rates on record. This is a horrible statistic. Now, hopefully, again, I don't know if bringing back more police is going to solve that problem, but hopefully it can do something to make a deterrent here, because we can't have a situation where a lot of these victims, Heather, as you're well aware, they're kids, they're children, they're teenagers. And yet, it just goes unreported. It's like a war statistic.
Yeah, again, this is another prime example of a city that has incredibly strict gun laws for law-abiding citizens. So the criminals are always going to find a way to arm themselves. They're always going to have guns. So when you have this type of crime rate, you need to look at what you're allowing your law-abiding citizens to do. And right now, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, they're not allowing citizens to defend themselves. They're not giving any sort of deterrent to the crime.
Yeah, now it's completely opposite in a lot of red states. I mean, some of these criminals, they're thinking twice before going into, I mean, it's just truth. I mean, if the deterrent is there, and they recognize it could be happening, well, they're not just going to be as aggressive. But in these blue cities, that's changing. Now, hopefully, people like Eric Adams in New York, who looks like he has a lick of common sense, on his shoulders, he is going to make some changes. That knucklehead in Chicago, she's not going to do a damn thing because she's absolutely worthless. So, and again, I was surprised the San Francisco mayor came out and said, hey, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to take back our streets. We're going to make this city safe. It's out of control. Kudos to her for saying that. At least, admitting you have a problem is the first step in the recovery. I guess that's what they say with alcoholics. But it is somewhat welcome news. And it was interesting. I'm combing through some stuff. And I'm reading where, the National Football League, they have a program, Heather, where they, as part of their, quote, social justice movement. Now, you and I both know why they do that, okay? They end up funding various groups. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to read it here. One of these groups is called Inspire Change. Nice, catchy name. Heather, anything but that. This group stands for defunding police, getting rid of prisons, open immigration, letting everybody into the country. It's basically a Marxist, Leninist type group, as are some of the other groups. Now, the real question I have for the National Football League is, why are you funding garbage like this? Well, I mean, what do you think about that, Heather?
I think that the dollars could be better spent towards things like youth football, right? That's in a huge decline. Maybe start utilizing things to build up the communities that you have these football fields in. There could be a lot of places that you could allocate these types of resources rather than funding divisive programs like that. I think that, but I mean, that's the thing right now, right? Let's divide the country more. Let's find a way to make people more uncomfortable with one another because for whatever reason, I still can't figure it out.
I thought the NFL learned their lesson when they tried all that woke crap in the COVID season. Ratings tanked. It was a debacle for them. The stuff with the national anthem. Okay, they got rid of that controversy. And then, again, I don't think people were aware of this, that they're actually funding this type of garbage. And they're doing it to try to quote, well, we want to be on the social correct side of things. This is garbage. There's no way, shape, or form. And I agree with you. If you want to put some money into community, put it into youth football. Put it into help to prevent injuries, head injuries, things like that. Do something productive for the youth, not just spending money on these social programs that, what are they called? What was it? The social justice arm of the National Football League. Give me a break. That's a joke. But all right, another a hot topic that I know is right down your alley as a conservative, Heather Shouse, is these mandates. Okay. Oh boy, I know I'm touching a hot button there. New York City comes out with their mandate. LA County came out with theirs. Then the state of California says we're going to have mask mandates return for anyone going inside a building. And then the day after they announce it, all these organizations are saying, well, I don't think we're really going to enforce that. I know one thing. I know you have no desire to participate in that type of situation. Give our audience your perspective, Heather.
I do not. I want to be very careful about how I talk about this because censorship is a real thing. So when you start talking about it and your personal feelings, you can be deemed as misinformation, and I don't want to do that to your show or to myself. So,
fair enough.
My opinion is I'm incredibly vax hesitant, and I don't think the government or the state in any way, shape, or form should be interjecting itself in a decision between an individual and their medical professional. I'm sorry, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not my doctor. So if my doctor has advised me that it's probably not a safe move for me to make at this point, then that's between me and my doctor, and that's my personal medical decision to make. You can't in one side of your mouth say it's okay to abort babies because it's my body, my choice. And then in the next side of your mouth say, no, we get to tell you what you inject your body with because we have the right to do that. You can't do those two things. It's either I have bodily autonomy or I don't. And at this point, I'm a free individual living in a free country. I do not need permission from my government, and I don't need permission from anybody else as far as my medical decisions are concerned.
You know, Heather, I think the reason Biden and the administration are pushing these mask mandates, what else are they going to have to talk about? Every single issue they're underwater on, the only one they're even approaching 50% on is how they handle COVID, and they're still underwater, like 46, 47% on that one. That's really the only thing they can talk about. And the interesting thing is some of the more liberal companies like Google, hell, they're threatening people to fire them if they don't have the vaccine. But then while Google's threatening to fire people that don't have the vaccine, other companies are saying, wait a minute, we're not going to enforce this. Healthcare workers is an example. There were some municipalities that were talking about getting rid of healthcare workers that weren't vaccinated. Well, guess what? The simple law of supply and demand took over, and they're like, uh-oh, wait a minute. If we fire these people, we don't have any healthcare professionals to take care of the people who need it. Maybe that wasn't the best idea. You know what? I agree with you. I agree. People should be able to make their choice, work with their doctor, and do what their doctor recommends, not have some mandated government policy stuck down their throat. Again, we're not advocating anti-vax by any stretch of the imagination. As we've represented on the show, every producer, director, yourself, myself, truly, we have been vaccinated, okay? But that doesn't mean just because we were, someone else should. And they should be able to have their choice on this. And again, I think it's a losing bet for the Biden administration. Just looking at some of the vaccination statistics, more of the country is getting it done voluntarily. It's just when you force it down somebody's throat and people get terminated because they don't get it, first responders, healthcare workers, police, firefighters. Hell, you've seen it all across the country. Some of these people getting fired are in key jobs where we need people.
Yes,
Yeah.
but they don't care. And I think it's really important to really think about why, right? If it's something that's so good for me, I should have no problem, going and getting it or whatever. If it's, why are you pushing it so hard? Why do you feel like you need to tell me it's so good for me? I'm sorry, but I think about that line, we're the government and we're here to help, right? Like, and that's never the truth. So, and I'm very hesitant. We start talking about these additional funds that are going towards police. The police are the ones that are the enforcement arm of the state. So when you have the states passing types of laws and edicts and things like that telling me that they're going to require me to do something they don't have the authority to do, it's the police that are going to go enforce that for them. So I encourage people to pay really close attention who their county officials are, their sheriff department, things like that. That's an elected police official. You really need to be paying attention to who you're putting in those roles.
Yeah, I concur with you 100%. Heather, another couple things that sort of happened today. I want to shift subjects away from crime and vaccine mandates. Let's talk a little bit about the economy. The Federal Reserve came out today and made their policy announcement that they are now going to accelerate the reduction in bond buying. Let me translate that, folks. What that means is in November, the Fed was aggressively buying bonds. They decided based on inflation to reduce from 120 billion down to 105. In December, it was reduced another $15 billion down to 90. In January, it's going to be reduced to 60, a la the increase in the reduction. They'll reduce it further in February, ended in March, and they've targeted raising interest rates sometime in April to thwart inflation. Heather, I think they're being still too loosey-goosey with this. I mean, we had producer price index come out yesterday, 9.8%. The consumer price index is hovering almost 7%. I mean, these are the highest inflation levels, folks, since 1982. And what does the Biden administration do? They came out, first, they blamed oil companies for the rise in gas prices. I mean, that's ludicrous. You know, when you shut down the Keystone Pipeline, you limit drilling on United States lands, and coming out of a pandemic, there's greater demand for oil, prices are going to go up. Then the craziest thing I heard, Heather, this sort of says, like, what are they talking about? Have you ever been, Heather, I know you go to the store. How's the price of meat been in the last 30 days?
It's really interesting, Mark. I started a project at the first week of October, and I call it #inflation receipts. You can find it on Twitter. Every Thursday, I go purchase the same 3 items every single week from the same store so that the control is the same. Mm-hmm. I get a loaf of bread, a pound of hamburger, and a gallon of milk. over the course from the first week of October until now, I have seen a personal inflation increase of 2.33% on those three items. So if you extrapolate that over the course of a year, just on those three items, you're looking at about a 30% increase, 30 to 35. Yep. So for a family to be going and purchasing their food, that is absolutely insane that you're telling me that for the same thing over the course of a year, I'm going to be paying 30% more for it.
Oh, and on prices of beef, it's gotten even more. Like you buy a steak that used to, T-bone steak maybe used to cost you $10, a month ago, now costs you $22, $23.
And we should be passing the Prime Act. And if you aren't calling every single congressional member to ask them to get that done, it should be done. It should be done yesterday.
I'll agree with you on that. And you know what's crazy about it? The Biden administration actually is so stupid. They're out there blaming the meat production companies for inflation. I mean, blame the oil companies, blame the meat companies, sick the Justice Department out to see if there's any price gouging going on. Mr. President, look in the mirror. Your policies are partially responsible for this. Not fully, but partially, significantly responsible for this. Open up the drilling, open up production, these crazy regulations, and don't blame meat producers for the inflation. I mean, Heather, that's just insane. But you know what? It is really affecting a lot of people. And, what the Fed did today was predictable, but what I don't understand about the Fed, and we've been saying this for month after month, they got how many thousands of PhDs from Ivy League schools there, and they still missed the inflation. It took regular Americans to feel it at their pocketbook to get the Fed to make action. I mean, these things could have been done months ago, and maybe we'd be in a little better situation, but we're not. So, that's that. All right, let me ask you.
But you got to remember, those things don't touch those people, Mark. They don't go out to the local grocery store and buy their own groceries. They don't handle the day-to-day life that regular Americans do. They're so far out of touch with reality that they have no concept. Joe Biden has no clue what I go through on a daily or weekly basis as a mother with children. He has absolutely no clue. You
and millions of other Americans. I mean, you're
yes.
representing what's going on a regular basis. I mean, you're in southern Indiana, the breadbasket of the country. I mean, right there. And so you see it. You see what I call real Americans dealing with this on a regular basis. And I would take it that most of your neighbors, friends, acquaintances, even people you don't necessarily hang out with that you just see in the local community, they can't be happy about these price increases.
They're not.
Yeah, and because wages aren't keeping up with the inflation piece. All right, let me ask you this. Senator Manchin is still sort of on the fence relative to this monstrosity of a bill, the, quote, Build Back Better $1.75 trillion bill. Folks, for both the viewers and listeners on the podcast, this is a monstrosity. There's so much garbage in this bill that the Democrats are trying to put lipstick on the pig on, plop it up, make it look great. The fact of the matter is, CBO scored this as if all these programs stayed for 10 years, it would blow the budget another $3 trillion. Now, Manchin comes out, Heather, and he correctly says, wait a minute, okay, that's true, but this bill isn't written that way. I think Manchin's going to continue to whittle it down and whittle it down. I think paid leave is going to come out. Maybe some of these other environmental programs, green energy, garbage will come out. Where do you handicap this, Heather? Because Schumer's continuing to push this garbage, and the American people don't seem to want what's in this bill.
Again, they don't care. If their friends are the ones that are going to get the contracts, their friends are the ones that are going to financially benefit from this, including themselves, based on whatever stock options they're getting ready to buy, because they know what legislation is getting ready to pass. They know. And so they don't care. They have zero concept or concern about the amount of money they are taking out of the average American's pocket and their children's and grandchildren's pockets to pay for these astronomical, ridiculous programs. So when we talk about green energy and things like that, has anybody ever gone or seen a mine where they get the materials for this, or what those individuals go through? But we're worried about oil.
Yeah.
It's just insane to me. I'll be honest with you, Mark. It's incredibly frustrating as a citizen to see that this is what they're worried about. They're not worried about curbing inflation. They're not worried about lowering gas prices. They're not worried about making sure that we can put food on the table for our families. They're worried about what kind of car do you drive? Is it a Prius? Well, I don't care about you then.
Yeah, and
it's like, it's just insane to me.
Yeah, and here's part of the problem with this bill. Some of the benefits in this bill go to the upper income Americans. As an example, they have tax credits in here for people earning $400,000 or $500,000 a year who go out and buy an electric car. They get tax credit up to like $12,000 for buying that car. I mean, that's a perverted way. Why are they rewarding the upper income people, $400,000 or $500,000? That puts you in that bracket in damn near every jurisdiction in the country. And then they're trying to increase the SALT, that's state and local tax deduction, currently capped at 10 grand. These liberal Democrats want to raise it to 80,000. Even Bernie Sanders said he doesn't want that. So they're trying to get their act together on what's the cap, how's that going to play itself out. And then, of course, Manchin, who comes from an energy-producing state, he didn't want to see all this green energy garbage. So, Heather, I think eventually they're going to get something done less than what they have now with lots of additional cuts in this. But Schumer's really trying to twist some arms. Biden was asked if he's got Manchin's vote yet, and he honestly said, no, he's not there yet. So, God, it's just the whole country is depending upon Joe Manchin right now.
I know. Thank goodness for the most powerful man in the country having the audacity to actually stand up for the American people. And Joe Manchin is not a Republican. He is not a conservative, but at least he can stand against the tide and say, look, what you guys are trying to do and railroad through here is ridiculous. And at least he's the one doing it. It's just, man, when you start voting across party lines like this and you're making it about right or left, when really it's about America. And we need to really start thinking about who we're putting in office and what their priorities are.
Well, put the country ahead of the party for sure. I know that's what you're advocating there. And thank goodness Joe Manchin is standing up. Give Kirsten Sinema some credit too. We haven't heard a lot from her lately, but she was in Manchin's camp. I can't really comment because she hadn't been in the news a whole lot lately. But hopefully this monstrosity of a bill will at least get whittled down or deferred until 2022. All right, let me shift over a couple other things. I've seen Congress do some of the dumbest damn things ever, but I think the one last night, it may have taken the all-time cake. Folks, here's what Congress did last night. While they're passing an increase, in the debt limit to raise the debt limit in the country, $2.5 trillion, basically that raises it up to $31.4 trillion. That's important. Okay, whether you agree or disagree with it, it's important. But what do they do on top of that? They pass some Islamophobia bill to appease Ilhan Omar. And basically what they said, they passed a bill combating Islamophobia on a worldwide basis. Heather, if there's 100 issues in this country that people are concerned about, that would be like number 108. I mean, it wouldn't even make the top 100 of issues, and yet the Democrats, the liberal buffoons in Congress, passed this bill along a party line vote. My head explodes. I'm like, what the hell are these people doing?
So again, they're out of touch with reality, but I want to actually touch on this for a second because congressional members' job is to uphold the Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. And the very First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, states that we have the freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. So if I want to say that I hate Islamic religion, I have the right to do that. Mm-hmm. All speech is free speech. I don't, and I'm not saying that.
Understood.
But what I'm saying is you're passing legislation that starts touching on the fundamental rights of citizens of this country. So what you deem to be an inappropriate thought or spoken idea, that's not for you to decide. So and it's certainly not, when did we start passing legislation for the rest of the world to adhere to?
Never. It's never happened.
And how are we policing that, right? Are we funding people to fly over to some random country to say, oh, you spoke naughty? We're gonna have to punish you. What jurisdiction do we have outside of this country? It's ludicrous.
It is totally ludicrous. And again, it just passed in the House. Who knows if it'll ever see the light of day in the Senate? But my God, and you know it would never pass be a Republican filibuster. But just the fact, I'm illustrating the point, elected Democratic representatives are wasting taxpayer dollars. You know, it costs money every time the House is in session. They're wasting taxpayer dollars debating something so stupid as that to appease Ilhan Omar. I mean, it infuriates people. All right, I'll get off that horse for just a minute. I thought Ron DeSantis did something pretty clever. I don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek or if he's really going to do it. But he said that he's going to ship all the illegals in Florida to Joe Biden's hometown and Barack Obama's hometown. I mean, I don't think he can do that. I thought it was humorous. But the fact that DeSantis came out and said it, again, he likes sticking that knife in the Democrats. He's not afraid to do it. But what he did,
Right.
he did say he's going to promote, and I haven't researched this yet, folks, but something called the Stop Woke Act. Have you seen that one, Heather?
I haven't.
Yeah,
I'll have
okay.
to look into it.
All right, we'll reserve comment on it, but look it up, folks. There's something called the Stop Woke Act. Only from Ron DeSantis could he create something creative like that. But the message DeSantis is signaling is, don't bring that woke crap down to Florida because we're not going to tolerate it down here, and they're not. And that's why his approval rating is sitting here close to 60%. You know, in a purple state like Florida. So what purple? I mean, in presidential elections, purple, not in any other election. But I thought it was really good that DeSantis, with all this turmoil going on, he says, no, we're not going to do this. And you know, Heather, he's always standing up fighting the critical race theory wars. I mean, they've passed laws in Florida against that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
kudos to Governor Ron DeSantis. All right,
For sure.
I want to ask you a couple other things here. Okay. You're in southern Indiana. Give our audience an update about what's happening, you know, in neighboring state Kentucky, the horrific tornadoes that came across. Biden's in Kentucky today. What's going on, Heather?
It's pretty terrible, actually. There's a lot of really good community efforts. I'll give just one quick shameless plug. If you purchase something off of my website, 75% of my profit right now is going towards buying presents for kids in Mayfield. I'm doing that until Saturday. And so a lot of efforts to try to get materials and things like that to the families in Mayfield, Kentucky. It's been really hard for them.
You know, it has been incredibly difficult, and that not only Mayfield, Bowling Green, Kentucky, the Amazon plant that was leveled just outside St. Louis in Illinois, heartbreaking stories, horrific pictures. You know, I am glad the president's there today. You know, he did approve disaster relief for the state of Kentucky. And sure enough, as soon as he does this, Paul Krugman, a liberal jackass critic for the New York Times, comes out and says, well, you know, now a red state's asking for federal government assistance. You know, Krugman, you can take that crap and stick it up your ass. That is the most horrific statement to come from a well-respected economist. I mean, that's typical of the left. That's what they do. They come out with some snide, snotty-ass remark anytime something happens, you know, in something other than deep blue New York City. It just disgusts me when I saw the headline about that, Heather.
Yeah, there were a lot of people with the blue check marks next to their name having no problem shitting all over Kentucky and saying, you know, that they deserved it. And when you have, you know, Thomas Massey and Rand Paul, Rand Paul, you deserve it. You know, it was just a lot of very awful things to say to families that are really hurting and struggling. I mean, you think about it, and to put it into perspective, just in that one town area, you had 70 people die. That is 70 people that will not be with their families in 2 weeks on Christmas.
Yep.
Or, well, 1.5 weeks now. But for that to be your go-to to attack a state or the people of that state because you disagree with them politically, it says a lot about where we are as a country right now.
Yeah, and probably a lot of that garbage came out of that cesspool called Twitter. And, you know, it's just disgusting. I do want to give Governor Andy Beshear a lot of credit. I'm telling you something. He has been out there in front of every camera, every situation, coordinating with the federal government. I know I don't always agree with him politically on a lot of stuff, but you know, one thing we do on this show, if someone's doing something right, you know, we will correct. We'll give them credit for it. And from everything I've seen from here on the West Coast, from the news accounts, Heather, Governor Beshear has been working again with the Biden administration through McConnell, through Rand Paul, and through the congressional representatives. And you know, he's acquitting himself quite well in managing this crisis for the state of Kentucky.
I can't speak to that. I don't like because I live in Indiana. I don't know, and I really don't like Bashir, so I really try not to follow anything that he does. But I'm glad to hear that he's doing what's necessary for his state.
Yeah,
so
we got to give him credit when they're doing that. All right, final thing, Heather. Okay, we got a couple minutes left. Joe Biden comes out yesterday. Here's a guy who's sitting here, arguably, pick your poison. He's 38%, 40, 42%. Let's just call it a 40% approval rating. And his disapproval somewhere from 54 to 57%. And I would not exactly call Joe Biden Nostradamus. Here he is, though, at a Democratic Christmas event, basically predicting, against all odds, that the Democrats are going to win in the 2022 midterms. Now, Heather, people may have been giving the proverbial clap to Joe Biden, but deep inside, they know he has no clue what he's talking about. Every indication right now is there's going to be a rout in the midterms because he can't run on safety because crime's everywhere. He can't run on stable prices. Inflation's everywhere. He can't run on the border. The border's out of control. I mean, he can't run on foreign policy. You know, you got the Russians at the Ukraine gate. You got the Chinese intimidating the people of Taiwan. And you had the debacle in Afghanistan. So outside of him pitching mandates, Heather, what are Democrats going to run on? Build Back Better or the infrastructure bill where most of the money is going to be spent over a period of 8 years? What accomplishment, Heather, can they run on?
Well, I think that's what they're doing, Mark. I think they're trying really hard to get that legislation passed. They passed the infrastructure bill that's insane. So I think that they're trying really hard to be like, look at all that we're doing for you. And the sad part is, Mark, much of the constituency on that side and even some of the middle are sadly misinformed or ill-informed. They do not educate themselves they don't read the bills. They don't do what's necessary to be kind of up and up. There's a D behind the name. I'm going to vote for it. So I think that's what they're banking on, is that the constituency stays stupid.
Well, hopefully the constituency is recognizing when they go to a grocery store every day or put gas in their car or pay their rent that the people in power controlling both the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, they're in power. It happened on their watch. And hopefully, Heather Shouse, when it comes to the polling in 2022, we're going to see a mid-course correction. So, if they want to go to your website, again, is it give them the webpage where they can go?
It's shouseinthehouse.com. And then when you're on the page, go to the store. Anything you purchase, 75% of the profit goes towards toys for kids. And the only reason I can't do 100% is because I have to pay for shipping. So,
yeah, no, of course.
So, yeah. And you can find my podcast. It's on all of the major platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. So.
Well, Heather.
And you can find me on Twitter at Shouse34, which is where I spend most of my time. And thank you for having me on.
Heather Shouse, it's always a pleasure having you on. Always enjoy talking to you. And I want you to have a great holiday season. I look forward to talking to you soon. Folks, I got one closing comment for you here. Gross domestic product, we're going to give you a little economics here, supposed to be 3.94% next year. That's down a little bit from where we are right now. Interest rates are rising. The Federal Reserve has a tough job ahead. Can they thread the needle to keep growth coming while raising rates and fighting inflation? I don't know. Last time we saw inflation like this, folks, was 1982. Ronald Reagan was president and Paul Volcker was the chairman of the Fed. And again, Heather's before your time, but Paul Volcker had to raise rates to 18% to get inflation under control. We're not saying that's going to happen, but at least they took the first step today to try to get this inflation monster under control. So, again, Heather, thanks for joining us today. Great commentary as always coming out of Southern Indiana on Schaftlein Report.
Thanks, Mark. Have a great night.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Stay safe, and we will see you on Thursday. Have a good evening.